Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Outdoors International. This is Cory Glauner, and today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk to Steve Zettel. He's an outfitter on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in the famed Frank Church Wilderness. And I've known Steve a long time, and I used to guide with him and for him both for mule deer, sheep, elk a little bit, but most mule deer and sheep. And he also runs a Middle Fork float business in the summer. And if you've ever thought of, well, I know you've thought about it, but most family vacations as a hunter, yeah, they're kind of a little disappointing. I know that. I speak from experience. Sitting in a resort when you could be chasing critters in the mountains. I mean, it's tough to justify sometimes, but you got to do what you got to do, right? But anyway, a trip that your whole family will like, that you'll love, your wife will love, your kids will love, is a float down the Middle Fork with Steve. It's truly an amazing experience that they'll be talking about the rest of their lives. You'll be talking about it the rest of your life. It's um, I couldn't. You just almost can't put it into words how special of an area it is, and you're doing something different that not many people do. Most people are going to Disneyland or to some resort somewhere, um, and it's just a vacation. So I think you're going to enjoy this one, and I think by the time we're done, you'll kind of get a better idea for what we're talking about. Joining us today is Fred Wright, and Fred is one of Steve's good friends, and he started out a client 22, I think he said 22 years ago. Fred went on his first trip with Steve down the Middle Fork, and since then he's done, I don't know how many, we didn't say that, but a number of trips. He loves taking his family, and he'll discuss why he loves it so much. I think you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, here's Steve.
Outdoors International. Live like you mean it.
Hey, good morning, Cory. Hey, just wanted to thank you for letting us come on here. This is going to be kind of a special talk. Hopefully we can convince some of your clients that Middle Fork of the Salmon is going to be their trip of a lifetime. Yeah, we invited a friend client of mine that a really good friend client of mine that Fred Wright, and we might as well let him introduce himself real quick, and we'll bring him back in a minute. But
All right.
we should let Fred at least say hello.
Hi, this is Fred. I'm from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and certainly enjoyed many trips with Steve and his family and crew in the backcountry, whether it's hunting or rafting. But both of them are. I always look forward to any times I get a chance to head out with these guys. That's for sure.
Yeah, I bet. I haven't been on a trip with Steve. I've hunted with you, but I've never been on a float trip, and someday I'm gonna do that. I imagine it's pretty great. I've heard lots of stories.
So Cory, we discussed a title for this podcast, and it kind of hit me last night, and I even wore the shirt. This is a Fred Wright shirt. Fred's a very successful promoter. I shouldn't say promoter, but he sells and develops promotional stuff. So like your hats, your T-shirts, cups. We'll let him talk about that later. But
Yeah.
But anyway, this is a shirt that he developed for one of his groups that came with us, and Fred have a habit of selling his trips as a trip of a lifetime, and everybody would say, well, Fred, we've already been, and he goes, well, then it's another trip of a lifetime,
Yeah.
and it stuck, and I think that's the title. It's another trip of a lifetime, and the caveat to that is that it's the perfect family
Okay.
experience.
Stand up so we can see your shirt. For
Well,
everybody
let's
on
see.
YouTube, they can see there.
There
You're
we
gonna have
go.
to talk.
I think I think it says Middle Fork. I can't quite read it, and then it's somewhere in there. It says another trip of a lifetime. It says some stuff on the back too, but we'll ignore that this morning.
Right. Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the goal here this morning is that you have a long list of clients that really entrust Outdoor International, mainly booking big game hunts,
Right.
probably a lot of fishing and whatnot. And in a lot of cases, those are really big ticket items. Even the smallest hunt, is still pretty sizable check for a guy to write. And, I've been an outfitter now for 35 years. I've been guiding since I was 16 years old. And what I find is that hunters by nature have no trouble writing those checks.
Right.
When I,
Amazingly, huh?
it is amazing.
It's
And
like crack. It's our addiction.
I guess, and and that's good. It keeps us all busy and generates revenue for these small communities and whatnot. But then I noticed that when you start talking about the family and that experience and sometimes it's a little tougher to get them to get the checkbook out when you're spending equal dollars on family versus the self. In fact, I've had clients that I was absolutely never allowed to tell their spouse what they were spending on a hunt. I had to take a few zeros off the back end of it to
That
let
always
them know.
blows my mind. But yeah, there's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you take your gamut, whether it's a whitetail hunt in Iowa or it's an elephant hunt in Africa, that's a big spread. But the point of this is that for those same dollars, your average guy could bring his whole family on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River
For the price
and
of just his hunt. He
yes,
brings his whole-
exactly.
Yeah.
That's on average, I would say that for the price of a lot of the hunts they're buying, they can bring all their friends and family. I mean, that's and that's a plus. And then the other plus to the Middle Fork trip is that um, I've outfitted and guided, like I said, for a long time. I've worked from the Florida Keys all the way up to the North Slope of the Brooks Range in Alaska, guiding big hunts, big game hunts, and lots of fishing everywhere. Obviously in the Florida Keys, a lot of scuba diving and spear fishing. Been to the Northwest Territory in the Yukon and Alberta. Just all over the place, and have had a lot of great experiences. But in my experience, there is nothing like the Middle Fork of the Salmon River for customer satisfaction. And I'm the snake oil salesman. Obviously, I'm an outfitter, and trying to get you to believe that. But the reality is, it's true, and I can't explain why. I just know that regardless of how somebody feels ahead of the trip, whether it's a mother that's concerned about the safety of her children, or she's just not a camper, or someone's afraid their children would get bored, or any of the multitude of reasons why somebody wouldn't want to go on a wilderness float trip, none of those matter on day 6.
Right.
In fact, without exception, they're all ready to go again. And it's amazing, that transformation. And that's a lot of why we brought Fred in, because he's seen that transformation over and over and over. I first met Fred almost 22 years ago, Fred.
Yeah, how long? Okay.
Almost 22 years. Fred came with a group of his friends. And it was when I first met my wife, actually. I'd known her for a couple of months, and Fred came along. And so anyway, that's my pitch. And I think we'd kind of like to hear from Fred and his experiences, what he thinks of a Middle Fork float trip. The one reason we brought Fred is because Fred is one of these guys that has this ability to sign up, and 24 hours later, he's got 23 friends and family coming with him.
That's
so
a great ability.
For some reason, people, it is. People love to travel with Fred. So he's that kind of guy. And he has done that many times with us. And so there you go, Fred, take it over.
Well, thanks a lot, you guys, for inviting me in on this podcast. I appreciate that. Appreciate my ability to sell my story. As I've thought about this, I believe the thing that I really like telling people about these stories, and when I meet people casually and I talk to them and say, "Oh, I'm a river runner and I But I really truly think that it's one of the best family vacations that you can ever take with your kids. I've said time and time again, my kids grew up since they were 2 years old, camping along a river, whether it's in Pennsylvania or Idaho or anywhere. But to take a family on a remote trip where there's no more Game Boys, there's no more, at this point, it's cell phones, and all the electronic distractions that people have. And, you think about it with your kids, you have, when you're driving in any kind of a long trip, you've got movies to watch, you have every kind of electronic device you have to distract your kids so they're not fighting and whining and crying and all that sort of stuff. And it is amazing when you take all of that stuff away, whether it's for a 2-day trip or, obviously our favorite is to do a week-long vacation on a river. It is just amazing to watch these kids entertain themselves time and time again. And of all the trips I have taken on rivers, all the vacations, family vacations I've taken with kids, it has been just amazing to watch them. Not one bit of fussing, fighting, nothing. And all it takes is about an hour back into reality with all the electronic stuff. And here you go, the same old stuff, the whining, the fighting, the whining, and everything else. So that's one of my favorite stories to tell about river running. And of course, the Middle Fork is by far our most favorite. Our kids always look forward to it. And obviously I look forward to it, and I look forward to selling this trip to new people who have never been down before, because you try your best to explain what it's like, and you never can. I mean, I can relate to it, because every time I go to a new place, you have all these visions about what you're trying to build in your mind, what this is going to be about. And am I going to be content? Am I going to be fed well? Am I going to get bored? Or is their agenda going to be different than my agenda and stuff? And every single time I go down this river, the Middle Fork, and every time I take friends down, they're all just like, I couldn't believe what it was like. I know any apprehension I ever had was all gone after day 2 or day 1 type of stuff. So that's what I guess that's my story. That's part of my selling point of certainly what river running in the Middle Fork is all about.
That's my experience too. Everybody loves the Middle Fork. I've never heard one person that has floated it and said, it was all right. Everybody raves about it. I think it's because, this is my take, like I said, I floated it once up with a scout trip with my son. So it wasn't like Steve's trip, but it was still the same river. But it's a good mix of excitement and fun and wildlife and relaxing and jumping off of rocks into the big deep pools and fishing and sun and beach and rapids. It's just that perfect mix. It just wouldn't you guys agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Another thing that I really enjoy about the canyon, myself just being in the canyon, is partly because you do not have any electronics. You don't have communication with the outside world. All of a sudden, you find yourself just living the life that's right inside that canyon. It's everything that's there. You quit thinking about stuff outside of work. Any other vacation you take while you have your phone, how many times do you have your cell phone out checking text messages and checking emails? And you're supposed to be on vacation, but you're really not on vacation because you're checking emails. You put your out of office emails on, but you're still checking emails. You're still replying, and you're not walking away from your everyday life. You're not really having a vacation anymore. You're not relaxing. And that is what the Middle Fork does that nothing else does. When you're in that remote country, you're just living right inside that canyon, and nothing outside of that canyon matters one bit, because
It's so
no
true.
inside.
Unfortunately, actually, that's true. What was that, Steve?
So Fred, I'd like to say that it's the one place where you can actually be where you are. It's there's not many of those places left. So going back to Fred's story and mine, both Fred and I grew up making car payments running rivers in Pennsylvania. That's a kind of we didn't know each other then, but I think Fred started pretty young, and so did I, just taking little raft trips back there. So, we grew up with that kind of in our blood. But I think the most important point we can make here is that you don't need to be that kind of person to enjoy this trip. I mean, it's great for the guy that just, eats rocks and dirt and climbs cliffs and hunts goats and all that stuff. That's wonderful. But it's also for the person that's never camped before.
Right.
It's for the kid that's not outdoorsy, because by the end, they all come around. There, without doubt. We had a gal just a few years ago, 74 years old, never camped in her life.
Wow.
And, we pushed her off down the river. She was a little nervous in the beginning, but I can't remember who she had come with, but there was some important, maybe it was her kids were coming and she wanted to be a part of it. And, by the end, you couldn't tell her from the rest of the gang. She had the same look and the same swagger and the same appreciation. And you would have never known that, she had never been in a sleeping bag and camped out under the stars if she so desired and all those things. And that's pretty unique too. I really hate to say we're glamping out there, but we kind of are.
That's what I was just going to say. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Most, I think it's the women who appreciate the trip the most, but it's also the women who prevent the trip the most.
Right.
And that's a very important part of this whole conversation that we're having here. There are a lot of women who, sure, they're outdoorsy and they love to do this kind of stuff, and they just they get in and it's just natural to them. And then we have the other women who come with their kids and their husband, and they're just coming along because
Their
they
husband
were
wants them
asked to. They don't want to be
Yeah.
left behind, but they're not really wanting to be there. And shoot, you put a glass of wine in their hand, they got a comfortable chair, their kids are all taken care of, they're having wonderful conversation, and it's beautiful. And then all of a sudden they go, well, I can do this. This is,
Right.
and they really appreciate it, because typically when you tell a woman to go camping, that means she's squatting a lot. Everything from cooking to cleaning dishes to going off behind the bushes. It's and this is nothing like that. But the unfortunate part is the woman who dictates the family vacation and never gives it a chance. And if I could change one group, one dynamic in the country, it would be that woman, because we know by the end they would be just like the rest. But to get them away from Disney World or Hawaii or the Ritz, it can be a little tricky. And a lot of times they just send the husband and the kids, and that's unfortunate, because we know
Absolutely.
in the end they're the ones who would appreciate it the most.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And that I was going to talk about the Disneyland and the resorts and all that. And they're great. I haven't been to Disneyland. Well, I wasn't as a kid, but I haven't as an adult. But I've been to resorts and I've been to the fancy place, and they're awesome. They're great. They're fun, but they're sterile and kind of boring in comparison to something like this. I mean, that's what everybody does. And doing something a little different, that you come home and you talk about this amazing experience that you just took with your whole family, and you're comparing it to somebody who just took their family to Disneyland. There's no comparison. That is not apples and apples.
But my worst nightmare of a vacation is standing in line.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's so true.
I like to say that the Middle Fork, anything for that matter, will have its X factors. Those things that you really have a hard time putting a finger on, and even if you do, trying to explain it to somebody that hasn't experienced it, is really tough. But I think one of the greatest X factors to the Middle Fork trip is that part of the family responsibility that exists on any vacation you do, except for a wilderness type trip. And more specifically, let's go to Maui, and we got the whole gang. We got grandma and grandpa, we got the in-laws, we got the wife and the kids and their cousins and everything else. And everything's great for that 2 hours when you're at the beach, right? Everybody's having a good time. And then all of a sudden, the teenagers want to go here, and the little kids want to do this, and the old folks want to go there, and then decisions need to be made. And then, you're just wanting to relax or maybe go do something else, and you can't quite do it because you got to be involved with one of those factions. And then go ahead and bring on nightfall, and all those issues become exacerbated. Like,
where do we go to dinner?
What are the young teenagers doing now that it's dark? What are the older teenagers doing now that it's dark? And what, people want to go to bed early, and people want to party, and what you find when you get on the Middle Fork, you don't think about any of those things, right? Because they're all happening without you. Like, it's the only decision you have is, do you want another beverage and what fly to tie on? I mean,
right.
and meanwhile, you're looking out there and you see it all happening. You're gathering with the folks you love at dinner time and on the boat and in camp a little bit, but at the same time, they're not underfoot. They're all happy. They're all just getting it on. What do you think about all that, Fred? I think I appreciate that the most.
I have to laugh when you talk about making decisions, because we've had some of those exact situations ourselves where you spend the entire morning talking about what you're going to do. Next thing you know, you're looking at your watch and going, geez, it's 11 o'clock and we haven't done anything. Then the anxieties go crazy. Then everybody's angry and griping at each other. And it's exactly that. I mean, when you're on the Middle Fork, it is just unbelievable. That just does not happen. And it's close stuff. You find yourself spending time with your kids rather than everybody splitting off and going a different direction where the kids go do this. And they do that some, but still it just brings everybody back together. You find yourself hanging out with your kids and talking with them and stuff that you don't normally do.
Awesome. Wasn't it Bruce Lee that said, "Be like water"? Isn't that him? that just, when you were saying that, for some reason, that's what I was thinking, was you be like water. You're floating. You just are. And there, you don't have any choices, which seems like it's not a good thing, but it is, because at what other time in your life can you just be like water?
Yeah.
Last summer, I had a group back on Big Creek at our fish camp, and then I had another group out on the Middle Fork, and I had concerns because I wanted to be with the fella that had booked the whole trip on the Middle Fork. He was a great guy, and I wanted to spend a little time with him, and so I was able to make that transfer from fish camp. I jumped in a plane, hopped over, flew into Loon Creek, which is at the halfway point, and as Fred could tell you, the second half of the trip's always the best because everybody's really let down by then. But they had, they had to leave and get going down the river, so they just left me a boat. And the plan was, whoever I replaced one of my guides, they flew out, and I jumped on the trip and rode the boat down by myself. And then, you start catching up with the trip. You can see them out ahead of you. And first you see the first boat, and then you can see some of the others going around. So I caught up with the last boat, and it was a husband and wife that were fishing. And the wife was struggling, and the husband's in the back of the boat, and he's having a great time fishing, and she's wrapped around the rod tip, and the fly's almost in the water, and I just pulled up alongside, and I knew the couple from coming a couple years before, and I just had Teresa jump in my boat, and we just backed off and started fishing. And the whole thing was just so seamless. And all of a sudden, before lunch, she had caught, a dozen or more fish. And just, it was, for me, exactly what you said, that just go with it, and right. So did she. It wasn't like, oh, I need this, and what do I do, and this and that. She just like, oh, okay. She stepped in my boat with her
just
rod.
Just obvious what to do.
Right. And her husband, her husband took off fishing. He was like, good. See you later. I'll see you at lunch, right? I mean, it was a dream come true for him, because his next step was he had to go to the front and teach his wife how to fly fish.
Right.
Man's worst nightmare, right? So it was like one of those special moments that you just can't put a finger on, but it was pretty cool.
Tell us about the glamping aspect of it, the food and camping, and you're in little tents, and it's a wilderness setting. So it's not cabins or big fancy tents. It's sleeping on the ground, but tell us about that.
So I'll give the nuts and bolts, and we'll let Fred give his impression. How's that?
Perfect.
From a guest. So in general, we can handle 24 guests at a time, which seems like a big number. They really dissipate once you're in the wilderness. It's in fact, most guests love the bigger trips. If they've been on multiple trips, they always like the bigger group more. And once again, hard to explain why, but they do. So to start with, we have a fleet of boats. And, those boats are pretty big. Like if you were trying to compare them to something, our boats are bigger than a mid-sized car. And those oar boats are run by a guide who sits there with oars, not paddles, but oars, and he's rowing those boats. And we'll have 4 or 5 of those. And if you were going to fish, sit back, take pictures, do nothing, or want to be kind of in the safe zone or the doing nothing zone and enjoying the float down the river, you'd be in one of those oar boats. And then we have a paddle boat, which would be more the size of the classic Volkswagen, that size car. And it can handle up to 7 guests, and they all have a paddle. And you're part of the team that maneuvers that boat down the river. And we'll have a guide in the back, and he calls the shots. And then, they go off and they paddle as a team. And, it's a little bit of an exercise and a little more dynamic than just sitting back.
And in those, you can hit the rapids more, right?
Well, you hit the same rapids, but what you find in river running is the smaller the boat, the bigger the rapid,
Right.
And so if you want more excitement, just downsize. The final one be jump in and swim. That's
Right.
that's with your life jacket. So, but the other option that we have, when the conditions are right, we have inflatable kayaks, and a person can get out in those by themselves, and now you have a 2-ended paddle, and you're heading down the river. You're on your own. You're with guidance, but you're out there. You're out there by yourself in your own boat. We also have a big old cargo boat that we call the sweep boat, and it has a rudder front and back, and we call those sweeps. I don't know why they're not called rudders, but they're called sweeps. And the Middle Fork is kind of famous for the sweep boats. And those are big. Those will be the size of like a 1-ton crew cab or bigger. And they'll haul, a ton of gear or more. And we typically will plunk one guide in there. He leaves in the morning, and he doesn't stop until he gets to camp. And he sets up vast majority of the camp. So he's got all the tents up, got the kitchen set, got the dining area going, just everything he can get done before the rest of the crew rolls in. So when you're done a day of floating, you're gonna pull in. Basically, you're gonna pick out which tent you want and who your tent partner is, and find your personal gear, which has traveled down the river as well. And that's pretty much kind of the end of your duties. Now, everybody has their own take on that. Some people just drop their bag, grab their fly rod and go, or put on their hiking boots and head up the hill, or grab a chair and sit back and, start happy hour. And some people like to rummage through their stuff for 2 hours. But, whatever it is, it's those are your responsibilities. Pretty much camp is taken care of. And then, so in camp itself, some of those amenities, we do have chairs for everybody, comfortable chairs. They're the folding, like director type chairs. We have tables to dine at. We have a nice kitchen area that's set up for the guides to cook in. And the good news is you're not allowed in there, and that's perfect. Most people don't want to be in there anyway. You don't want to be cooking. You don't want to be washing dishes. But if you're that type of person, by all means, we'll put an apron on you. We'll give you a mission, and you can get in there and join the crew and have fun doing those sorts of things. The other amenities around camp, like we mentioned, the tents, they're sizable enough for 3 people, but we plan for it's a couple per tent, and if the numbers don't work out, there's an odd number. We have extra tents for that scenario. We really promote the sleeping out under the stars, which is wonderful. It's an experience that most people don't get to experience much.
Right.
We're blessed on the Middle Fork. Very, very few mosquitoes and no-see-ums almost non-existent most years. I mean, if we're putting on bug spray a couple times a summer, that's a lot. It's high desert country, very little precipitation, typically safe to sleep outside, not much dew, those kind of things. So those kind of experiences, are hard to, once again, put a finger on. But, having the whole family sleep out under the stars on the last night on the beach is kind of special. But the tents are always there if that's the option you choose. Real plates, real silverware, wine with dinner, margaritas one night.
What is
cool.
dinner? Dinner's fancy, right?
I would say I like to say we cook normal food, lots of it, and we cook it well.
Right.
We're not trying to feed you edible flowers, and we're not,
Right.
it's kind of traditional food, ranging from, salmon on the grill, baked potatoes, homemade cheesecake the first night, through an Italian night with lasagna, Caesar salad. We'll have traditional breakfasts of, French toast and pancakes. We even do eggs Benedict. We have a Mexican night, like I said, with margaritas.
Fred, wouldn't you say that sounds pretty fancy for being in the wilderness?
I spoke earlier about that, and I always relate back to my first trip and, what my apprehensions were. And certainly one of the apprehensions was, are they going to feed me enough? So I'm trying to bring all kinds of extra power bars and Cliff bars and, stuffed in every corner of my sack and stuff. Just, they didn't feed me enough. And that was didn't need that. Right. At all. And I love watching that happen with, because each trip that I have organized and put together to come down the river, that, there's always some new people there. And I really like watching everybody have those same apprehensions I've had, and then watch them just go away, whether it takes 1 day, 2 days, and sometimes maybe 3 days or something. But it's like, wow, they're really feeding me a lot here. This is really good food.
Almost always when people come back from a float down the Middle Fork, that's what you hear. It was awesome. It was amazing. And the food was great. We did not expect to eat like that. Ate like kings. So
a couple of years ago, Fred brought a group, and I'm sure there's always newbies. There's people that have been with us before, and they'll always have a few folks that have never been down the river, and and that's always fun. But we're in Stanley, and everybody runs around last minute. You can never have enough stuff, right? I mean, regardless what's on the list, you gotta better, and you're going to go get more than what's on the list. And we opened it up to beverages as well. We bring soda pop and juice, and we have coffee and tea and all the condiments. And like I said, we have wines and we'll have Gatorade mix and, just everything you would need. But somebody might want to bring Fred might want to bring his own beer and a lot of it. And then inevitably there's always somebody running over and trying to bring some bottled water. And I imagine one of Fred's group went over to the grocery store and bought a couple of gallons of, like something Rocky Mountain spring water of some sort, right? And they're sitting there, and and I went off, on this little tirade of, did you see the picture on that jug? Well, where we're going is where they took that picture. Why on earth would you bring that water where we're going, right? And to this day, I don't know who brought the water, but it sat there. Whoever brought it was terrified to touch it because they knew.
Yeah, Steve gave a pretty hard lecture on that. So.
It just took a ride in the sweet boat.
It did all the way, and then we ceremoniously dumped it out at the end because nobody got dehydrated. Everybody had plenty of wonderful water that comes from the heart of the earth, and it was but it was just funny. I don't know how long we're going to do this, Cory, but I'd like to take a minute to insert here what is probably the most important part of our trip, and we haven't discussed it, and it is part of that X factor, and it's what makes the trip special, what makes Idaho Wilderness Company special, and that is our guides. Without a doubt, they are and always have been a special crew. Now, I've been doing this, like I said, for over 35 years. They're obviously not the same group, But if you plucked them out and intermingled them and shuffled the deck and resorted them and dealt out 6 guys, they're all the same caliber. We've trained them all ourselves. I run this business with my family in mind. My kids are finally grown now. They're 21 and 20. My younger son has Down syndrome. So, I will always treat him more as a child, probably. Not that we don't expect a lot out of him, but
Right.
from I would not turn him loose with a bunch of meth heads and expect him to be okay,
Right.
And so when I hire, when I train, when I have expectations, it's all based on, what I want my kids to be with this group, what I want my wife to be with this group, what I want my friends to be with this group. And without exception, that answer is always yes. They're rock solid. They tend to be, non-pierced, non-tattooed, fairly clean cut, but by the same extent, pretty cool, true outdoorsy guys. They're not wannabes who don't know what a baby deer is called and those kind of things. They all have a bit of a hunting culture behind them, which is really important because we are hunters and fishers by nature,
Yep.
with my business and yours.
Yep.
The last thing you want to do is send some guy that appreciates hunting and have him go out there and be chastised for 6 days for
Right.
those sort of likes or dislikes, and so I think that's a real important part of what we offer. But those guides, I think I'll turn that over to Fred because he could speak once again probably better from a guest perspective.
Now, I certainly have over the years caught myself selling that, so much about how, you can go on some of the best wilderness trips or some of the best hunts and everything else. But, if you're not, if your guides and your people around you aren't fun to be around, then boy, it sure makes for a miserable trip, So I always look forward to Steve and his crew, and that is part of my selling point for sure. It's just like, hey, you're in good company. These guys are taking well care of you and stuff, and they're just truly fun to be around. We're intermingling with them and talking with them and joking with them and everything. And I have a pretty rough crew sometimes that comes down, and they tolerate my crew very well. So.
Another thing too is it's not like you need to be a hunter either. It's not like your guide's gonna be talking about hunting the entire time, but sure, it would be fun if you are a hunter and your guide also is able to talk intelligently about hunting. So that's special. I don't think that's something that you would get on most river trips, and for sure, Steve, that does apply to our clients for sure, because they're hunters at heart. Most of them hunters or fishermen. So
I think your Bruce Lee statement is perfectly defines our guides. They have, I call it, they know we have a set of bookends, and that's the boss's rules, and they're to stay within those bookends, but then go with the flow.
Right.
We do not try to dictate somebody's trip. That doesn't work. And if like somebody like Fred's coming down the river and he's got a half a dozen folks who've been with us before, the first thing I tell them at our orientation, the night before the trip is, don't try to relive. You'll never get there. This trip will be another trip of a lifetime. It's not going to be the same trip of a lifetime. It'll be so different. Other than the, maybe camping at the same place, there may be, or the menu, there may be nothing that's the same. It's just, and the guides are what make that happen. And
right.
The other thing is the guides are what allow for that freedom that Fred and I discussed earlier, where the kids are here and the spouses are there and the old folks are because they're the ones that are moving at rotary speed the entire time without you even noticing it, that food's on time and it's done well, and the kids are out playing in the river. Who's with them? Oh, AJ's with them. Oh, all is
Right.
well. I
While
thought he
you're
was
sitting
cooking
in the
dinner.
hot springs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just all happens so seamlessly that, it just makes it real easy to enjoy yourself.
Awesome. Hey, Fred, do you have a funny or what's your favorite memory? Can you pick one out from floating the Middle Fork?
Oh boy, I'm wasn't ready for that question there to be put on the spot. Uh, um,
You know what? While he's thinking about it,
some of
I'll
them
tell
I
you my
don't know if I
favorite
can
Fred
tell.
story. What's that?
I said I'm not sure some of them I can tell.
Go for it.
No, we've had a lot of fun. I think back to a trip now that was probably, I don't know, maybe a dozen years ago now, but we got on that. We had the Middle Fork Idol. So usually there's somebody who brings along a guitar and all kinds of singing goes on and stuff like that. But boy, that was a funny one, and that's I remember when it finally got around to one of Steve's guides' bones. It was his turn to get up and sing in front of everybody, and next thing you know, he was gone. He was up halfway up a mountain. He wasn't about to sing in front of everybody. But yeah, it's fun to listen to the whole campfire start. Everybody start chiming in and singing with whether it's out of key or in key or whatever. But those are some fun times for sure. So
Awesome. What were you going to say, Steve?
Oh, I have my, if I have a special Fred moment, and there's a lot of them, you got to realize, I didn't know Fred, 20, 21 years ago, but Fred's become one of my best friends, and we have fished and hunted everywhere from the Florida Keys up to salmon fishing in Alaska, and we're already planning our next trip, and a lot of real special moments. And Fred's been a really good friend to me and my family and whatnot. But years ago, his kids were young. My kids were young, probably in that 2 to 5 year range. And he brought another family and himself, and they flew into fish camp. And so my family's back there, and here comes his family, and we got all these kids getting off an airplane, and it's, as you know, there at Cabin Creek, it's about a 20-minute walk down to the river.
Yeah.
Fred and his buddy, they looked and said, I can see how this is going to go. They just grabbed their fly rods and said, we'll see you at the creek, right? Which was smart. Let me handle all these kids, get the duffel all loaded on mules, get them over there to the camp, right? So these guys, they throw on their fishing shoes and their vests and their fly rods, and they took off. Now they left their rods in their cases, but took off for the creek. And it took me over an hour to get everything loaded up. We got the kids all marching, some of them on horses and mules, and I'm carrying some. And we get down to the creek, and we picture we're going to see, the river runs through it. Fred and his buddy out there casting and catching, and they're both sitting there with these frowns on their face. And we get across the creek, and they're sitting on the other side, and we're like, what are you doing? And it turns out his buddy was stringing his line through his fly rod, and he, instead of pulling the line all the way up through, he just got the leader through and got lazy and gave it the big pull.
Broke his rod.
Snapped the tip right off. Now, you could do that in front of, Cabela's every day, right? And it would never break. But, do it in the wilderness, and he broke off 6 inches of his rod right off the bat. Well, Fred was stringing his rod, and he says to his buddy, he says, man, that's weird. I do it all the time. I never had a problem like that. And he pulls his and breaks his off too. So here's the two guys. Not an hour into the trip, they both got broken fly rods. But Fred, being the consummate fisherman, he had spares that just happened to be on the mule with me. So they were a little.
They were just waiting for you to get there with all the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. But since then, Fred and I have broke plenty of rods on big fish, and it's been quite a friendship that continues.
Yeah, that's something we didn't. I mean, we mentioned that you can fish, but we didn't mention how good the fishing is.
I don't need to say a word. I'm going to leave Fred.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. I sell that as how many places you go for 100 miles of catch and release fishing. And it's just awesome. And they're all native trout. They're not something that they put a stock truck in a day before type of thing. These are fish that were born in the river, grew up in the river. And, to me, that makes it extra special. I like going the extra mile to find wild fish and not something that came out of a fish hatchery and stuff. So that's really cool. And boy, to just go down and every eddy you see, it's like there's a good chance there's a fish behind that. All I got to do is get that fly to land in the right spot and land there long enough to be able to catch a fish. But and that's a big selling part I do. My friends who are fishermen, and even the friends who aren't fishermen, they sometimes become fishermen. My wife, certainly, that was her first real experience of fly fishing, and because you actually catch fish, all of a sudden you think, oh, now I'm a fly fisherman now.
Right.
So I can go home and tell everybody I know how to fly fish now.
And for the most part, you're not nymphing. You're actually you're casting dries, and they are hammering the dries.
Yes, that's especially good for people who are just starting to fly fish, because trying to throw a nymph rig with weights on it and then strike indicators and all that extra stuff to get tangled up. So it is a little easier to start with a dry fly, and it makes you feel like a fly fisherman right away.
Yeah, and for some reason, it's more satisfying to catch them on a dry. I don't know why that is really, but it is.
Yeah.
Well, on the fishing, Cory, Fred says it best when he says, you actually catch fish there, and you can't overstate that. It's you catch fish,
right?
And if you want kids involved in fishing or your spouse involved in fishing, you need them to catch fish. And so 2 points there is one, the guides love to make that happen. Right. They savvy fishing, they put you where you need to be, but they also don't mind teaching. That's and the teaching's easy out there because we're not double hauling, we're not making 50-foot casts. We're if you get to fly in the water, you have a great chance.
Right.
Even if it's straight down, because we're already in the river.
Yeah.
And so typically we'll get families, and dad will bring a fly rod, and then he'll bring some spinning rods for the kids, thinking that's easier and whatnot. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's better if everybody just brings fly rods, and they can be $40 combo rod and reels. It doesn't matter, but having those kids stand in the front of a boat and get that fly out there 15 feet from the boat, and having a fish come up and hit it about every 30 seconds, and watching them learn how to set the hook and then getting them in and this and that, it's pretty special. There's nothing like learning to fish where the fish are biting. That's
Absolutely.
You can't, it's just, that's hard to replace. And, the Middle Fork tends to be that way. Pretty special all summer long too. We have to get out of that high water season. And that's maybe something else we should talk about is, there's different seasons on the Middle Fork. They're hard to define year by year, but if you went to the law of averages, you're going to say that early June is going to be big water. So if you're looking for the biggest whitewater, the real excitement, the stuff that you see in movies and stuff, you want to come early June. And then, as June progresses, the water recedes, and it's all based on snowpack. So some early Junes might be like a normal July, but typically, this year, for instance, we've got a lot of snow. June 5th is going to be, really fun, but that's not a time to bring, a 6-year-old on the river.
Right.
I wouldn't allow it. I wouldn't bring the 74-year-old non-camper, on that trip. It's for, self-reliant, teenagers and adults that understand that, they might take a swim and those kind of things,
right.
But we're prepared. We got life jackets. Everybody's got a wetsuit, and then as we get into mid-June, all of a sudden that goes away. Rapids become more defined. The water clears up, fish start biting, typically by the end of June, we're catching fish with a lot of consistency. And then once we roll into July and August, it'd be hard to describe the difference between a July trip and a late August trip. They're very, very similar. The water might be down a little bit, but that's the backbone of the family time. Late June, and then July and August. That's when you want to be looking, because that's when the water is swimmable, the fish are biting, the stars are out at night. It's just all those things that make life with your family in the wilderness a lot easier. So. And as far as ages go, that's a conversation that I have with the parent. We don't carve anything in stone. All I say is, how important is this child to be on the trip?
Right.
For the money spent, would you be better off sending a 5-year-old with grandma for the week and let her, or do you want to bring that person? And that becomes a parental, decision. From a safety standpoint, I don't have any concerns. Our biggest concern is, do you have a life jacket on?
Right.
And that's we have 2 rules on the river. Respect common courtesy and wear a life jacket all the time. Those are the ones we go on. And so as long as somebody has a life jacket on, that's what matters. You don't need to be a swimmer. You don't need to be a water person. None of those things matter.
If you don't want to, I mean, you can almost get through the float without getting wet if you stay in the big boats and not literally, but almost, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would say, especially, you get into, August,
Yeah.
rapids are real defined, unless somebody goes out of the way to bring a big wave over the boat, you can, I think you're correct.
Yeah.
The other part of that is, the first thing on our gear list is mandatory rain gear, pants, jacket with a hood. And it's amazing how many people go down the river and never get it out of the wrapper, which is pretty cool to spend a week in the wilderness and you're on a river trip and you never took your rain gear out of the wrapper.
Yeah.
And some of that's because it didn't rain. Some of that's because the weather was beautiful and, and anything in between. But, if it's chilly, you might wear your rain gear. And if it's raining, you might wear your rain gear. But if it doesn't do either, you could be content without. So,
absolutely.
What do you think, Fred?
Yeah, you guys have covered a lot here. So I'm glad I really got to say my piece about it, because certainly for being a family vacation, it's just awesome. I mean, what a way to spend with your kids. I've had my father-in-law down multiple times, and we just really, really enjoy it as a family trip. And I know it's a great trip as an individual, but boy, what a vacation to just get out, get away from it all. And if you have kids, I don't care whether they're teenagers or 10 or 7 or what, getting your kids out away from electronics for a whole week is the most unbelievable experience you'll ever have. And just watching your kids just get into the outdoors and get into living the moment kind of stuff, rather than living something else, somewhere else type of stuff. And it's even getting that so much more for the adults now, because how much we're looking at our phones every single minute for emails and text messages. And it's a way to get away from it all. And it just doesn't get any better than that. So that's my selling point. I love that. And it's something I always look forward to, for sure.
Are you going again?
Oh yeah. We have the next trip planned already. Don't worry.
Good.
So awesome. Cory, I'd like to finish up with just talking about the group dynamic.
Okay.
I think somebody listening to this might be saying, well, there's only 5 of us. What does that mean? So we can take 24 guests at a time. We have a lot of folks who, much like Fred, will either organize a trip or pay for a whole trip and then bring the guests of their choice. We have companies that, book entire trips. They'll send, half a dozen of their representatives, and then they'll, bring 18 or so of their, their best clients or their suppliers, or, whatever relationships they want to improve on, they'll get them out there for a week. We do continuing education seminars where guys will come out, and for a couple hours a day, they'll speak their piece, and then all the professionals on the trip get to write the trip off,
Right.
So that's pretty special. But back to probably if we had to put who's our average guest, it's going to be a family of 5, and they won't know anybody else on the trip. I mean, that's the average. Okay. And they will just get put in with another group of this 12 family and these 2 old guys and this, this little group, and it'll add up.
Seems like probably a nightmare. Honestly, seems like that wouldn't work.
It does. It seems that way. One thing we need to remember is we're not going Christmas shopping, and we're not at the mall. We're not with a bunch of irate people that don't want to be where they're at. So it's interesting. We have about about an hour long orientation the evening before the float trip begins. So we're in Stanley. We're out on this beautiful deck, Sawtooth Mountains in the background. We're right on the Salmon River. And whether it's a group of 24 people that know one another or it's this hodgepodge of whatever, they all sit there for an hour. We make sure that they're prepared to get on the bus and head into the river the next morning and go down this trip. The difference is when you go to day 6 and we're gathering in front of the stack of boats to take a big old group photo, the end is always the same. You can't tell who was part and who wasn't part. Right. Who knew who? Like we're having lunch and everybody's grabbing their bags and all that down at the ramp at the other end. You if you just showed up, you could not pick out who's with who. The kids are all running together. The wives are crying because they're never, they've made new best friends. It's sounds hokey, but it's life changing. Yep. And those relationships you build over those 6 days, which could seem long to some folks, doesn't seem long enough to others, but those relationships are forever. Look, I got a best friend here, that's talking with us today as a result of a trip like that. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know that Russ, he went on a trip with you with his family, and there was another couple there. I don't know if it was a couple or a family, and they were actually, I don't know if it was just the woman, the wife, or both of them, they were anti-hunters, and they were in the same boat with Russ, and Russ is all hunting. And you would think that just wouldn't work, but I know that those Russ and Carol and that couple, they still talk all the time, and I think they're planning on booking another trip with you guys together to float the trip again together. And they couldn't be more opposite, and in other walks of life would never have become friends, ever. Wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. It's hard to put your finger on, but it happens out there, and it happens 100% of the time. It's
pretty good odds.
It's a no-brainer. The best wilderness trip, the best outdoor trip you'll ever take with your family. And I'd like to take credit for that, but I don't think I can take all the credit. It's something really special about doing a trip like the Middle Fork, where there's a beginning and there's an end, and you successfully navigate from that beginning to that end and doing something you've never done before. And a lot of I don't know what the word would be, but when it's over, you got a lot of satisfaction there.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I don't think the trip I went on was anything like yours. Actually, I was with, like I said, a group of 30 Boy Scouts, and we just,
that would be a little different.
Yeah. It was still fun though. It actually,
absolutely,
it was awesome. And it was awesome. It was one of my favorite trips I've ever done, but yeah, I don't think it's like your trip at all. So on that note, are we good?
Yeah, I think Cory, we should do this again. And I talked with Jess about maybe having a woman's episode to talk more in detail about teenage girls and mothers and grandmothers and what their issues were before and after.
Right.
And then maybe another one on more of a corporate level.
Okay.
The importance of what kind of relationships you can build out there, and whether that's
do you want to talk price at all on because I think people would be surprised, hunters especially would be surprised how it would compare to a hunter. Do you just want to leave it in general? You could bring your whole family for the price of an average hunt.
No, I have no problem with that. We charge different rates for different times of the year. Basically 2 different rates. We have a peak season rate, which is June 23rd, clear through the end of August. Now we basically launch about every 8 days when we go. Those trips are $23.50 a person, and then we give a 5%, a 5% discount for children, and we consider a child anybody you're still paying for. So if they're their 4th year in college, they're still your child.
Gotcha.
That's fine. And then we have a preseason rate that's $17.50, and that's if you're willing to get out of that prime time, family vacation schedule. So early June, so June 5th, June 14th, and then actually the last 2 weeks in August are that postseason rate, which is the same as the pre, and that's August 18th and August 26th. And then occasionally we'll do 5-day trips in June, but we typically, the whole group needs to be doing a 5-day, and then that's a little more reasonable yet. And the reason we can do 5-day trips in June is just because the river's usually higher, moving quicker. And sometimes on a corporate end, like this June 23rd, we have a 5-day trip scheduled because it's a business trip. They're going to have guys busy front and back in Boise before and after the trip. So, so they just wanted to do 5 days on the river. And then, and anytime you start talking, big groups, 12, 20, 24, then we'll negotiate some sort of a better discount probably. So,
okay. All right. Well, good to know. Good stuff. Thanks, guys. I know, Fred, you got to go skiing. Poor guy. So
yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun to join in on this. So.
Well, good. I hope you enjoyed it. I think that I think this is a trip that everybody should consider if they're outdoorsy at all. And honestly, even if they're not, but if they're not, they're probably not even listening to this. But this is something for everybody: couples, families, corporate, like you said. And if you'd like to know more about it, just go find us on Outdoors International. Just search us on Google. You can find us. We'd love to talk to you about it. We'll probably get you in touch with Russ, who's been on this float with Steve. And so Steve's an amazing outfitter, and we'd love to get you set up on this trip. Take your family. Live like you mean it. This is Outdoors International. Signing out.